This episode is brought to you by White Cloud Coffee Roasters, where every bean tells a story of adventure and passion. Nestled in the heart of Idaho's mountain wilderness, White Cloud has been mastering the craft of coffee for more than 38 years, bringing the spirit of the outdoors into every cup. Discover the difference in their premium beans, meticulously roasted to capture the essence of the mountains. From robust, full-bodied classics to creative flavored blends, White Cloud coffees are designed for you to appreciate the subtleties of premium coffee. Now, listeners of our podcast can get an exclusive 10% discount. Just use the promo code CREATIVITY at checkout. Visit whitecloudcoffee.com and use the code CREATIVITY for your 10% discount. Start your adventure today. Journey to whitecloudcoffee.com. Tap into your most original thinking. Organize your ideas and create the opportunities to launch your creative work. Unlocking your world of creativity with best-selling author and brand innovator, Mark Stinson.
Well, welcome back, friends, to our podcast, Your World of Creativity. And here we are at the milestone episode of 325. I don't even know what that means in terms of dog years, months, weeks of podcasting, but it's always fun to look back at when we hit these mile markers and say, where have we come from and what have we done? So today we're going to go across the country. We're going to be in Cincinnati, Seattle, LA. We're going to be finding out where some of our previous guests are today, what have they been up to, and what are they looking forward to, and that sort of thing. So let me start by bringing in the room here Mark Graban. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. It's great to see you again.
I think back to episode 32. I know our listeners are counting. Episode 32 in September of 2020. You were doing a great series of interviews on people's favorite mistakes, what they've learned from them, and now you got a book out by that title.
Yeah, September 2020 was when that podcast launched. It was a pandemic project of mine. Podcast called My Favorite Mistake with entrepreneurs. And we have now 2 members of Congress ended up on the podcast somehow. Rare that they would be willing to talk about mistakes. And business leaders, athletes, entertainers, and a lot of the stories from that podcast, then I decided to compile into a book with some of my own lessons learned. The book is called The Mistakes That Make Us. So maybe that's a mistake, giving it a different name than podcast. The podcast name maybe was a mistake because it was inspired by the Sheryl Crow song of that same title, and it's a SEO disaster. I should have called it something slightly different, but the book does.
Maybe for the second edition, you can get Sheryl Crow to write the introduction about all the search you created for her. Yeah, very good. Now we're going over to Seattle, and let's bring in Jeff Leisawitz. Jeff, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on your show.
Back in June of 2022 on episode 191, you had a book just out, No Effing Around. It's the no BS guide for getting your creative dreams off the ground. And it was really the whack on the side of the head, quit fooling around and let's get it.
Exactly, yes. So that book has been out there for a while now. I have a new one. This one just came out a couple months ago, The Magical Impact of Storytelling, How to Connect Minds and Open Hearts. I'm a writer. It's one of the things I do. And really, communication is part of every kind of art form.
Yeah. Can't wait to get more into it. And then now down to LA to talk to Chris Hood. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for being here.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
I think back to December of 2022, episode 216. Back then you were head of business development strategy for the Google brand, and now author of a couple of great books and involved in a video game company project that you founded.
Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of everything.
You're mixing it up. You got your hands there.
Yeah, I left Google, decided to write a book, decided to write a couple of books, working on a third book, and decided to start a video game company. Keep myself busy.
There you go. Lots of lessons learned for you, I'm sure, Chris. How does that now leverage into what you're doing? How do you try to maybe communicate all those lessons in these books?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I get asked often is, when you left Google, why did you decide to write a book? I can write a book now because I don't have to worry about either Google editing it or Google taking ownership of it. And I can put all the good, juicy stories in it. without worrying about any legal complications. I think timing is everything. And even full circle, we see in the video game industry, as an example, there's tons of layoffs. There's tons of people that are experiencing hardships. Studios are closing. And I get asked the same question, like, why are you doing it now? Now's the best time to do it. And I think that's a great way of kind of thinking about it. We talked often about failures, mistakes that we make, and then how do we leverage those mistakes to innovate, to grow, to evolve personally and professionally. I think all of what I learned throughout my time at Google and then onward was, how do you embrace this? How do you look at things differently? How do you take these stories and apply them to help other people? How do you learn from your mistakes?
Yeah.
So I think the relevancy of this conversation that we're all going to have is personal growth and success in times of turmoil.
For sure. And thinking about all that talent that's out there, what are the implications of the newest development in non-competes? I guess the dissolving of non-competes. What do you think that means for sharing our stories, but also for talent really being able to flourish?
Yeah, I think non-competes is a very interesting conversation. Really, if you dive into it, some states like California have had non-compete. They didn't care about non-competes for a long time. Other states were more aggressive about those non-competes, but doing away with them altogether is going to really, I think, make companies more active in ensuring that their employees are happy, that they are satisfied in the work, because it's going to become increasingly easier for me to just leave my job and go find something else. If I'm not happy at my work, if the culture isn't what I'm looking for it to be, then I can just pack up, go, and I don't have to worry about those non-competes. So it's going to introduce some areas of concern for organizations, really nothing to do with technology. I actually don't believe that the core issue of this is you're going to take all of our ideas and then go implement those at other organizations. They can't do that anyways. That's not what non-compete is, right? It's that you have these skill sets and I want to keep on those skill sets. Let's just say AI, for example. Everybody is looking for somebody who can specialize in AI. So if I find somebody, I don't want to lose that individual. It's not necessarily, again, the technology, it's the skill sets. And so how are you going to keep those skills in-house? How are you going to make those individuals happy and content so that you don't lose them to other competitors who might be willing to pay more for it?
Exactly. And Mark, I see you nodding there because certainly a lot of your contributors and stories and guests and interviews had these mistakes, or I wish I would have done it differently. I'm going to try it something at my new company, or the bosses who said, I wish I would have treated the employees better so they wouldn't walk away.
And I think that's a common mistake in businesses. I do a lot of work with healthcare organizations, and these organizations sometimes feel entitled to keeping their employees. And then if an employee wants to leave, the company complains about the lack of loyalty. And that's a two-way street where I think companies stopped being loyal decades ago. And I think something that kind of puts the balance back in the employee to go to a place where they can have their contributions appreciated. And that's not just a higher salary or compensation package, but like being appreciated and engaged on a day-to-day basis. It's a mistake to try to lock people in through compensation or legal agreements.
Yeah. Everyone talks about golden handcuffs and parachutes and everything else. Just the visual imagery of escaping is so interesting to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Why are we handcuffing our employee to a desk, even if that desk is at home? No, we're ordering them to return to the office. And
now you got to come back. We've got a better lunch now. So it's going to be all the rage. Jeff, you're also thinking about how people then tell their story. Sometimes we think about storytelling and it's all the fad now and trend to think about your brand story, but your personal brand story has to be told. And in the light of this discussion, how do we tell a better story about our skills?
Yeah, so it's my belief that at its best, storytelling is a way for us to be seen, expressed, healed, and connected. So I can break that down a little bit if you guys want to hear that. But essentially what this means is When we are true to ourselves and when we can express that with authenticity and courage and vulnerability, and we can put that story, whatever that is, out into the world, we give that gift to the world. But it actually gets better than that. Because when we do give that gift of our story to the world, we become the gift. Because we show others that they can be seen, expressed, healed, and connected. And that changes us from just a bunch of writers or storytellers or artists of any kind into sort of like this undercover ninja army that's here to help bring the world together. And clearly, we need that big time now.
Yes. And I couldn't help but maybe take a highlighter on that word healing, because as soft as it sounds, words like compassion and empathy and all that, but there's a lot of healing to be done, isn't there?
Oh, yes, there is healing to be done on basically every level from the individual. We all have pain with this world that knocks you around from the beginning. And then within relationships and companies and nations and the whole world. So it's like, how can we get this together? And telling stories that are true for us and that help us connect is really, I believe, one of the more positive things we can do.
Mark, how many of your guests use the words like, I'm a recovering something?
Yeah, I've
whatever
heard
the piece, whatever position they were in.
I've heard recovering perfectionist probably most often. Recovering engineer is a phrase that's come up a few times, and as an engineer, I get that. I guess I've used that phrase before too. Yeah. But to start talking about things like vulnerability and healing and feelings, we talk a lot about helping people feel safe to speak up in the workplace, to admit mistakes and not be afraid of being fired for something that really wasn't their fault. Being vulnerable, I think, is admirable, but when we can reduce some of the risk involved in speaking up, that reduces the vulnerability. That makes it easier for everyone to be able to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's important to me anyway.
Yes. And Chris, your gaming company, I love the subhead of the mission, a haven for unearthing wonder through play. We think play, it's like get down to work, but boy, we could use a lot more play.
Absolutely. Again, it goes back to your enjoyment levels when you're at work. So even if we take it away from gaming for just a moment and we think about something like retail, we as consumers have always had an experience where, say, you go into a retail shop and you're trying to look for help and you're looking for somebody to help you, and you finally find somebody and they're just grumpy and they don't want to help you and they ignore you, or they're like, oh, they hand it off to somebody else. And why is that happening? Basically, because they don't want to be there. And their unhappiness at that workplace is now coming off on you, which is making the overall experience for the consumers miserable. And so if you think about having fun at work, if you think about that level of play that we would like to have, it's not just for the benefit of the culture that you are building. It is also at the benefit of the consumer that is engaging with you. Because if you are having fun at work, then most likely your customers are also going to have fun. And when I think about it from a gaming perspective, in this concept of unearth wonder, I wanted to be able to build a culture where not only the internal team is having fun. Look, we're building games. We should be able to have fun while we're doing that, but also that we understand the end result is ultimately for the game players, the consumers who are going to be engaging with it. And if we can create and build that level of additional fun, then we also believe that the players should see that in the transaction between us and the game that they are playing.
So good. Mark, look ahead. What else are you working on these days, and what do you see coming for the rest of the year?
So I've been doing a lot of speaking on themes related to the book. Forgive me, I'm going to hold it up again for those who
There
are
you
watching.
go.
The mistakes that make us. A couple different types of one about learning from mistakes as individuals, and how does that cascade into learning, doing a better job of learning from mistakes as teams and organizations. And then there are some talks that have done, and it's a popular topic in healthcare, taking a little bit deeper dive into psychological safety and why that's such an important foundation for things that hospitals are trying to achieve: patient safety, clinical excellence, continuous improvement, trying to help connect the dots. Sometimes what we don't need is more problem solving training. That's fine. But if people don't feel safe pointing out problems, all the problem solving training in the world doesn't lead to much. So I'm trying to get that message out. And I'm working on a new book that would be related to the most recent one on that specific theme. So a shorter book aimed at a much more specific audience of people who are struggling with continuous improvement culture, if they're struggling with quote unquote lean manufacturing, lean healthcare, lean management type concepts. That book's going to be a little bit more laser focused on why that psychological safety piece is really, a non-negotiable foundation. So
Yes,
hoping to get that written by the end of the year.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Jeff, what about you? What's stirring for you?
What's stirring for me these days? I'm into a, you might call it a fine art form, but you might not. So I'm a big coffee fan up here in Seattle. So I'm constantly like spilling my coffee. I pour it in and I'm not paying attention. So you ever see the rings from the mug?
Sorry to interrupt. I've got one on the cover of my book.
There
Oh,
you go.
perfect.
It's
Well,
right
you're-
there.
Coffee stain ring.
Yeah, he's a napkin kind of a guy right there.
Yeah, you're gonna love this. I'm looking at these coffee stains that are on my counter and I'm like, these can be beautiful. This is a beautiful thing. It's a mess. So I start experimenting with coffee stains, coffee rings on watercolor paper. And I come up with the right density of the coffee and the right mug and all this and that. And then I'm like, these things are really beautiful. What else could I do with this? So I got a vintage typewriter and I started typing on these things. And I've created these little pieces like this. So everyone's different. I don't know if you can see that too well.
Yes.
This one says, behind every writer is a substantial amount of coffee. So I've come up with like hundreds of these like coffee phrases and I type them all up and I've been taking them to, the art fairs and just had a show at a coffee shop around here and stuff like that. So
Fantastic.
pretty fun.
Well, I
Are
think
you
we have a
selling-
new outlet because I'm now a partner in the Eagle Coffee and Bakery in beautiful Eagle, Idaho. Send me a set of those on consignment and we'll move them.
And
All right.
I was going to ask if you're selling those online anywhere, Jeff.
Yes, on Etsy.
Etsy. Okay.
Yes,
Mhm.
fantastic.
Search your name on Etsy.
It is Coffee Thoughts Art on
Okay.
Etsy.
We'll put that link in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chris, what is ahead for you?
Oh, a bunch of more excitement. Yeah. Working on another book. So I've got a third book on its way. Should be available by the end of the year. And it's another business book. So excited about that. And then I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements and workshops. So individuals who are looking for any type of customer experience or customer centric types of organizational discussions, I can come and do some workshops with you. Obviously, the video game company and our first game, it's a mobile game, and that should be due out also somewhere by the end of the year. We're looking at currently around September, October timeframe for that to go live. And other than that, just having fun.
There you go. I wanted to ask you all, one of the side benefits of this podcast has been the connections, not only for me, but for guests like yourselves. And thinking about the collaborators, if you were to throw the net out and say, there's some collaborators I would love to team up with, if anybody's listening, what is the essence of the kind of collaborators you like to team up with? Why don't I start with you, Jeff?
If you can find a local guitar player who's funky and's got some groove, please send them my way. I'm trying to put a band together and I can't find the right person. But in a bigger sense, movie producers. I've got a couple of TV and feature film projects that could use a producer. So yeah, stuff like that.
Great. Chris, who would you like to team up with?
Investors, send me your money.
Send checks.
Send me checks. Yeah. One of the big things right now for the game studios, we're actively searching for investors, VC, 10 million. So anybody out there with 10 million sitting around interested in the video game space, ping me for
Good
sure.
deal.
Other than that, anybody who is in the customer space. So if you want to talk about, again, customer centricity or collaborate on blog articles or any type of content for the internet, feel free to reach out.
Good. Mark, who would you like to team up with?
I'm going to ask Jeff first. I'm not looking to join a band. I'm not local. Are you also a drummer, or what's your instrument? Bass?
No, I play bass. So I've got a long history as a musician and music producer. Many years ago, I was named Best Independent Electronic Artist in the World. That was in 2000, and that is long since gone. I thought I was going to be up there with Moby.
With Pitbull.
So yeah, I've done a lot of music for film and TV and stuff like that. But these days, I just want a live, kind of like groovy jam band.
Yeah.
I'm
not a professional, but I still enjoy playing drums. And to answer your question, Mark, I'm looking to collaborate with leaders and organizations, whether that's startups or bigger companies that are trying to tackle this idea of a culture of continuous improvement, a culture of innovation, a culture of learning from mistakes. I'd love to partner up and provide education or coaching with people who are looking to solve what I think is a really important challenge and a really key to success for different teams.
Fantastic. Well, hoping all those dots connect and that we all stay in touch. This has been fantastic catching up with you guys. My guests have been Mark Graban, Jeff Leisawitz, and Chris Hood. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
And all the links are in the show notes, so you can find each other, and then listeners, you can find out what they're working on. So it's been great catching up in this little reunion episode, our 325th episode, a milestone, and it's thanks to listeners like you. We found out we have listeners in about 25 countries, and so it's been very rewarding to truly make it a world of creativity, and that's what's been fun about the podcast. So come back again for our next episode. We'll stamp our creative passports in cities all around the world to unlock your world of creativity. For now, I'm Mark Stinson, and we'll see you next time.
Unlocking Your World of Creativity with best-selling author and brand innovator, Mark Stinson. This program was produced by BSB Media, creators of IntelliKey Leadership Stories, Unlocking Your World of Creativity, and thepeaceroom.love. Are you an author who's tired of the long waits and low royalties? Exact Rush is here to change the game. We specialize in publishing with precision, and we get your book to market in just 3 to 6 months, not years. But we're not just about books. We also support your photography, web design, and content creation needs. Our focus ranges from spirituality to pop culture, and we're excited about our diverse lineup of upcoming releases. So if you're ready to keep more of your hard-earned money and get published faster, Exact Rush is your ticket. Visit exactrush.com and turn your creative dream into a profitable reality today.